opened her eyes to blue light and cold air. Her head hurt. Her mouth was dry. She tried to move her arms, but they felt heavy like stones. Slowly, her vision cleared and she saw where she was. A glass box. She was inside a glass box. The walls around her were smooth and clear. Beyond them, she could see metal floors and strange machines. The ceiling was high and dark. Small lights blinked on panels she did not recognize. The air smelled clean but wrong, like a hospital mixed with something chemical. Pushed herself up from the floor. Her military training kicked in immediately. She checked her body first. No wounds, no broken bones. Her uniform was gone, replaced by a thin suit that felt like paper against her skin. They had taken her boots. They had taken everything. She pressed her hand against the glass wall. It was thick and cold. When she knocked on it, the sound was dull. This was not normal glass. This was something stronger. Movement caught her eye. In the cell next to hers, a man was waking up. She recognized him instantly. He was a scientist from her ship, who studied alien life forms. His glasses were gone and his face was pale, but he was alive. Knocked on the glass between them, turned his head and saw her. Relief flooded his face. He crawled to the wall and placed his palm against it, matching hers on the other side. They could not hear each other through the glass, but they did not need words. Pointed to her eyes, then around the room. Look around. Observe. Nodded and began studying their prison. Counted 12 cells in total. She could see other humans in some of them. Most were still unconscious. Across the corridor, 3 cells down, she spotted a young woman with short black hair. She was the pilot of their transport ship. The last thing remembered was an alarm, a flash of light, and then nothing. They had been captured, but by whom? The answer came within the hour. A door slid open at the far end of the corridor. The sound was soft, almost silent. Pressed herself against the back wall of her cell and watched. The creature that entered was not human. It stood on 2 legs like a person, but that was where the similarity ended. Its body was covered in a hard shell, dark green and shiny like the back of a beetle. Its head was triangular, with 2 large compound eyes that reflected the blue light in hundreds of tiny mirrors. Below the eyes, a set of mandibles clicked together softly as it walked. The creature wore a white coat, similar to what doctors wore on Earth. It carried a thin tablet in its 4-fingered hands. As it walked down the corridor, it looked into each cell, studying the humans inside like a farmer checking on livestock. Stayed very still. She kept her breathing slow and quiet. She watched. The creature stopped in front of her cell, its compound eyes fixed on her. She could not read its expression. It had no face she could understand, but she felt its attention like a weight on her chest. It spoke. The sound was strange, a series of clicks and hisses that meant nothing to her. But then, a moment later, a flat mechanical voice came from somewhere in the ceiling. Subject is awake, female, adult. Physical condition appears normal. A translator. They had a translator, filed this information away. The creature made more clicking sounds. The translator continued, no visible injuries from capture process. Good. This specimen will be suitable for extended study. Specimen, the word made stomach turn cold. She was not a person to this thing. She was a specimen. The creature tapped something on its tablet and moved on to cell. It made similar notes. Then it continued down the corridor, observing each human in turn. When it reached the end, another door opened. A second creature entered. This one was larger with darker coloring and what looked like metal decorations on its shell. Its movements were sharp and impatient. A military officer guessed. Every species probably had them. The 2 creatures spoke to each other. The translator picked up parts of their conversation. How many survived the transfer? The larger one asked. 12 specimens in acceptable condition, the scientist replied. 4 others did not survive. Their biology is fragile. Fragile, the officer repeated. then they will not be useful for heavy labor. Perhaps not, but they are interesting. My preliminary scans show unusual brain activity. They may have value for research. The officer made a sound like grinding stones. Research does not win wars. I need workers. I need soldiers. Can these creatures fight? The scientist clicked his mandibles in what might have been amusement. Fight. Commander, look at them. No claws, no natural armor. Their teeth are flat, designed for grinding plants. Their skin is thin enough to cut with a dull blade. They have no venom, no spines, no defensive mechanisms of any kind. Walked back towards Cell and gestured at her with one long arm. This species survived on there through pack behavior and primitive tool use. Nothing more. They are, by any reasonable measure, one of the weakest intelligent species we have ever encountered. Commander studied through the glass. She stared back at him, keeping her face empty. She would not give him fear. She would not give him anything. Weak, said slowly. Then they will be easy to control. Extremely easy, agreed. I recommend we complete our study quickly and then transfer them to the labor pools. They should be compliant enough. The two aliens left through the far door. The lights in the corridor dimmed slightly, shifting to a softer purple. Night cycle, guessed. Even aliens needed to sleep. She waited until she was sure they were gone. Then she turned to face Cell. He was watching her. His eyes were sharp now, fully awake, fully aware. He had heard everything too. The translator had not been selective. It had broadcast the entire conversation. Smiled. It was not a nice smile. The aliens thought humans were weak because they had no claws. They thought humans were harmless because their teeth were flat. They had measured muscle density and bone structure and skin thickness, and they had drawn their conclusions. They had not measured the thing that mattered. Looked down at her hands. They were ordinary hands. Soft palms, short nails, thin fingers, nothing special, nothing dangerous. But these hands had built pyramids and split atoms. These hands had crossed oceans and conquered mountains. These hands had created weapons that could burn cities and medicines that could save millions. The aliens did not know what humans were capable of. They did not know what happened when you trapped a human in a cage. They did not know about the fire that burned inside every person born on that brutal, beautiful planet called Earth. They would learn. 3 days passed in the glass cells. The aliens brought food twice each cycle, small cubes of something that tasted like nothing but kept hunger away. They brought water in sealed containers. They watched and recorded and discussed the humans like they were animals in a zoo. Learned their patterns. She learned when the guards changed shifts. She learned which aliens were careful and which ones were lazy. She learned that the translator in the ceiling worked both ways, but the aliens rarely listened to what the humans said. They did not think human words were worth hearing. She also learned about that was what they called themselves, had figured it out from fragments of conversation. They were an old species, proud of their technology and their empire. They had conquered many worlds. Humans were just the latest curiosity. On the 4th day, something different happened. Entered the corridor with 2 guards. They went to each cell and attached small devices to the walls. The devices projected a view of another room, a large chamber filled with rows of seated. It looked like an auditorium or a lecture hall. Stood at the front of this chamber. Behind him, a massive screen displayed an image of a human body. It was rotating slowly, with lines and symbols pointing to different parts. Today, announced to his audience, I present my complete analysis of species 7742H, known to themselves as humans. Watched through the projection. Around her, the other captured humans watched too, pressed close to his glass wall, studying everything. Sat in her cell with her arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes narrow and angry. Used a tool to highlight different parts of the human diagram. Let us begin with their physical characteristics. Humans are bipedal, warm-blooded, and covered in thin skin that offers almost no protection. Their bones are dense but brittle compared to exoskeletons. A single blow from a trained soldier could shatter their limbs. The audience murmured in what sounded like agreement. Continued. They possess no natural weapons, no claws for tearing flesh, no fangs for killing prey. Their teeth are flat and blunt, designed for grinding vegetation. This suggests their ancestors were primarily herbivores or scavengers, not hunters. He changed the image to show a human hand in detail. Their fingers end in soft nails, not claws. These nails cannot cut through anything harder than their own skin. Their grip strength is measurable but unremarkable. They cannot crush bone or tear metal. One of the officers in the audience raised a limb. How did this species survive on there? Our data indicates it is a Class 4 death world. Extreme temperature variations, toxic atmosphere pockets, large predators, seismic activity. An excellent question, said. The answer is simple: pack behavior and tool use. Humans survived by staying in groups and creating external weapons. Without their tools, they are helpless. A single human, alone and unarmed, poses no threat to any, regardless of age or training. He brought up more images, showing humans using machines and weapons. All their power comes from what they build, not what they are. Remove their technology and you remove their danger. That is why our captured specimens are so docile. They know they are helpless. Kept her face blank. Inside she was burning. Spent the next hour detailing human biology. He talked about their slow healing compared to some species. He talked about their need for constant sleep. He talked about their weak senses, their limited hearing, their poor night vision. He made the humans sound like broken machines, barely functional, a mistake of evolution. The audience grew bored. Some of them left early. By the end, only the scientists remained, taking notes and nodding along with conclusions. In summary, finished, humans present no military threat and limited labor value. However, their unusual brain structure and social patterns make them interesting subjects for behavioral study. I recommend continued observation before transfer to the work colonies. The projection ended. The devices on the walls went dark. The corridor returned to its normal blue glow. Silence filled the cells, then slowly turned to look at. He was smiling. It was the same kind of smile she had worn days ago, the kind of smile that meant someone had made a very big mistake. That night, when the lights dimmed to purple, the humans began to communicate. They used hand signals and lip reading through the glass walls. They passed information down the line of cells like a whispered chain, shared what he knew about biology. Their exoskeletons were strong, but their joints were weak. They could lift heavy weights, but they moved slowly. Their compound eyes gave them wide vision but poor focus on fast movement. Shared what she remembered about the capture. The ship had used some kind of energy net. She had seen the layout of the docking bay before she lost consciousness. She could draw a map from memory. Shared her observations about the guards. The shift change happened every 12 hours. There was a gap of almost 2 minutes when the corridor was empty. The guards carried weapons but rarely held them ready. They did not expect trouble from weak, clawless humans. In the corner of cell near the floor, there was a small hatch. It was a maintenance access point, sealed with a heavy padlock made of steel. The aliens had installed it carelessly, probably for cleaning or repair purposes. They had not considered that a human might try to open it. Had examined the padlock carefully over the past days. She had measured it with her eyes and tested its weight with gentle touches. Steel was strong. Their scientists were very proud of it. But remembered something from her training. She remembered stories of mothers lifting vehicles to save trapped children. She remembered soldiers carrying wounded friends across impossible distances. She remembered that human limits were not fixed numbers. Human limits were suggestions that could be ignored when the need was great enough. They had studied human bodies. They had missed human spirits. Caught's attention from across the corridor. She made a sign with her hands. When? Held up 2 fingers, 2 more days. They needed more information. They needed to be sure. She pressed her palm against the glass wall that separated her from. He pressed back. In 2 days, they would learn what happens when you cage a human. They would learn that claws and fangs were not the only weapons that mattered. They would learn about will and rage, and the desperate fire that burned in the heart of every person born on Earth. They would learn that some things could not be measured. Closed her eyes and dreamed of home. She dreamed of blue skies and green trees and the sound of rain on windows. She dreamed of freedom. Soon, she told herself. Soon came to visit on the 6th day. He entered cell directly, which he had never done before. 2 guards stood outside the glass door, their weapons hanging loose at their sides. They looked bored. Sat on the floor with her back against the wall. She made herself small. She kept her eyes down. She had practiced this posture many times over the past week. Weak, harmless, defeated. The alien scientist towered over her. Up close, she could see the tiny hairs on his mandibles and the way his compound eyes reflected her image in hundreds of pieces. He smelled like copper and antiseptic. Subject 7 said. The translator turned his clicks into flat words. I have questions for you. Nodded slowly. She did not speak. Good, you understand obedience. This will make things easier. Held up his tablet and tapped something on the screen. Tell me about your role in your group. What was your function? Engineer said softly. She made her voice small and tired. I fix things, machines, equipment. A technician, low status. Shrugged her shoulders in a way that suggested agreement. In truth, she had been the chief engineer of a military research vessel. She had designed weapons systems that could burn through starship hulls, but did not need to know that. And the others in your group, what were their functions? Scientists, pilots, workers, kept her answers short and vague. She watched his mandibles click with satisfaction. He thought he was learning about her. Really, she was learning about him. The scientist walked around her cell, examining the walls and corners. He stopped at the maintenance hatch and touched the padlock with one long finger. You have noticed this, he said. It was not a question. Tensed slightly, then forced herself to relax. Yes. Do you know what it is made of? No. Made a sound that might have been a laugh. This is steel, the strongest material our empire produces. It is used in our warships, our weapons, our most important structures. Even our strongest soldiers cannot bend it without machinery. He looked at with what she guessed was amusement. I show you this because I want you to understand your situation. There is no escape from this facility, not for creatures like you. Nodded, she kept her eyes on the floor. Tell me, continued, do humans have any way to break such material? Any natural ability I might have missed? She shook her head slowly. We are not strong, you said this yourself. We have no claws, no armor. We are weak. Yes, agreed. You are weak. It is good that you accept this truth. Acceptance will make your future easier. He tapped his tablet again, recording notes. Subject shows appropriate submission behavior. No signs of aggression or resistance. Confirms hypothesis that humans are fundamentally prey animals, not predators. Bit the inside of her cheek to keep from smiling. Let him believe what he wanted. Let him record his wrong conclusions in his scientific notes. Asked more questions. He asked about human sleep patterns, eating habits, social structures. Answered everything with half-truths and misdirections. She described humans as peaceful farmers, quiet builders, gentle creatures who preferred running to fighting. The scientist ate it all up like honey. When he finally left, the glass door sealed behind him, waited until his footsteps faded away. Then she stood up and walked to the wall that connected her cell to his. He was already there, waiting for her. Through the glass, she moved her lips carefully so he could read them. Tonight. His eyes widened. He glanced toward the maintenance hatch, then back at her. "Are you sure?" Nodded once. She had been watching the power systems all week. She had noticed a pattern. Every night during the deepest part of the dark cycle, there was a brief fluctuation in the energy grid. The lights flickered. The door locks reset. It lasted only seconds, but it was enough. The guards changed shifts at the same time. For almost 2 minutes, no one watched the corridor. It was sloppy. It was careless. It was exactly what needed. She turned to look at Cell across the corridor. The young pilot was watching through her glass wall, alert and ready, made a series of hand signals, nodded in understanding. The other humans in the cells had noticed the silent conversation. Some of them looked confused, others looked scared. But a few, the ones who had served in military or dangerous jobs, looked ready. They had been waiting for this moment. Returned to the center of her cell and sat down. She would need her strength tonight. She closed her eyes and focused on her breathing, slowing her heartbeat, calming her mind. They had studied her muscles with their machines. They had measured her bones and her blood and her brain waves. They had written reports full of numbers and conclusions. They thought they knew everything about humans. They did not know about the sergeant who had carried 3 wounded soldiers through a burning building. They did not know about the grandmother who had fought off a wild animal with a kitchen knife. They did not know about the child who had walked for days through a desert to find help for her family. They did not know what humans could do when they had no other choice. Had shown her the steel padlock and asked if humans could break it. Had lied. She had said no, but the truth was more complicated. Under normal conditions, a human could not tear steel. The metal was too strong, the body too limited. But these were not normal conditions. This was survival. This was freedom. This was the difference between dying in a glass cage and going home. Remembered something her grandmother had told her when she was young. The old woman had survived a terrible disaster, one that had killed thousands. She had walked out of ruins that should have crushed her. And when Young had asked how, the grandmother had smiled and said, "When you have no choice, you find a way. When giving up means death, you discover strength you never knew you had. That is what it means to be human." Tonight would discover her strength. She waited as the hours passed. She watched the blue light slowly shift toward purple. She felt the temperature drop as the facility entered its night cycle. She counted the minutes until the guards would change. Soon, very soon, they would understand their mistake. They had captured humans. They had studied humans. They had written reports about humans. But they had never met humans. The lights flickered. Was on her feet before the first flash ended. She had counted the seconds perfectly. The power fluctuation had begun. Through the glass walls, she could see the corridor plunge into darkness. Emergency lights came on, casting everything in dim red. The hum of machinery stuttered and coughed. Somewhere in the facility, an alarm began to sound and then went silent. This was the moment. Moved to the maintenance hatch in the corner of her cell. The padlock hung there, heavy and cold, made of the strongest metal in the Empire. She wrapped both hands around its shackle. The metal was thick. Her fingers could barely fit around it. The edge of the lock dug into her palms like a knife. She planted her feet against the floor. She bent her knees. She took a deep breath. And then she pulled. Nothing happened at first. The lock did not move. Her muscles screamed from the effort. Her shoulders felt like they were tearing from their sockets. Sweat broke out across her forehead and dripped into her eyes. But she did not stop. She thought about her crew, trapped in glass cages like animals. She thought about smug voice calling them weak. She thought about home, about Earth, about the people waiting for her to return. She thought about every human who had ever been told they could not do something and did it anyway. And she pulled harder. The pain was incredible. Her hands were slippery with blood now. The metal was cutting into her skin, grinding against her bones. Every nerve in her body was screaming at her to stop, to let go, to accept that this was impossible. Had never been good at accepting the impossible. Deep inside her, something ancient woke up. It was the same thing that had driven her ancestors to cross frozen wastelands in search of food. It was the same thing that had pushed humans to sail across unknown oceans, to climb mountains that touched the sky, to strap themselves to rockets and fly into the void of space. It was the refusal to die, the refusal to surrender, the refusal to believe that any obstacle could not be overcome. The steel began to bend. The sound was strange, a high whine like metal crying in pain. The shackle of the lock twisted in her grip. The molecules that held it together, the bonds that made it the strongest material in the Empire, began to fail. Her arms felt like fire. Her back felt like it was breaking. Blood ran down her wrists and dripped onto the floor of her cell. She did not stop. With a final scream of tortured metal, the shackle snapped in two. Fell backward, the broken pieces of the lock still clutched in her bleeding hands. She hit the floor hard and lay there for a moment, gasping for breath. Her whole body was shaking. Her vision was blurred with sweat and tears. But she was smiling. She pushed herself up and looked at the maintenance hatch. It swung open easily now, revealing a dark tunnel beyond. Cold air flowed out, carrying the smell of oil and electronics. A service corridor. A way out. Turned to look at the other cells. Was pressed against his glass wall, his mouth open in shock. Across the corridor, had tears running down her face. The other humans were staring at her like she was something from a dream. "What are you?" whispered. Her voice was barely audible through the glass. Held up her bloody hands. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "Human." There was no time to rest. The power was coming back on. The guards would return any second. Crawled into the maintenance tunnel and found what she needed, a junction box that controlled the cell doors. Her fingers left red smears on the controls as she worked. The locks were electronic, but the emergency release was mechanical. She pulled the master lever. 12 glass doors slid open at once. Was the first one out of his cell. He ran to and caught her as she climbed out of the tunnel. His face was pale with worry. "Your hands," he said, "they need treatment." Later, wrapped torn strips from her suit around her palms. The bleeding slowed but did not stop. "We need to move." Was already organizing the other humans. There were 12 of them in total, 10 adults and 2 teenagers. Most were scared, but they followed orders. Had the natural authority of a pilot, someone used to making fast decisions in dangerous situations. "The docking bay is 6 levels up," said, pointing toward the far end of the corridor. "I remember the layout from when they brought us in. There are at least 3 checkpoints between us and the ships." "Then we go through them," said. She reached into the maintenance tunnel and pulled out a bundle of tools she had found inside. Heavy wrenches, sharp cutting implements, lengths of cable that could be used as rope. Nothing was designed as a weapon, but everything could become one. The humans armed themselves in silence. Their movements were quick and focused. Fear was still there, but something else was stronger now. Hope, determination, rage. The corridor lights flickered back to full brightness. Alarms began to wail. Over the intercom's voice rang out with panic. "Containment breach in Section 7. All units respond. The specimens have escaped." Smiled again, that cold and dangerous smile. "Let them come." She led the way out of the cell block. Behind her, 11 humans followed, their bare feet silent on the metal floor. They moved like shadows, like ghosts, like the predators their ancestors had been before they invented language and art and kindness. They had called them weak. They had called them prey. They were about to learn the truth. At the end of the first corridor, 2 guards appeared. They were running toward the cell block, their weapons drawn but not aimed. They were expecting to find locked doors and helpless captives. They found instead. She moved faster than they could react. The heavy wrench in her hand cracked against the first guard's knee joint, the weak point had identified. The collapsed with a shriek of pain. Before the second guard could raise his weapon, was on him, driving her elbow into the gap between his neck and shoulder. Both guards were down in 3 seconds. The humans stepped over their bodies and kept moving. "We need to find the docking bay controls," said as they ran. "If I can reach them, I can seal the blast doors behind us." "You'll get there," promised. More guards appeared. More guards fell. The humans fought with tools and fists, and the desperate fury of caged animals finally set free. They were not graceful. They were not skilled warriors, but they were determined and they were together, and that made all the difference. His hands were screaming with pain. Every impact sent fresh waves of agony through her torn flesh. Blood soaked through her makeshift bandages and left red footprints on the floor behind her. She did not slow down. She did not stop. Somewhere ahead there was a ship. Somewhere ahead there was freedom. And was going to reach it, no matter what it cost. They had thought humans were weak because they had no claws, but claws were just weapons of the body. Humans had something better. They had weapons of the mind. They had the ability to endure pain, to ignore limits, to keep fighting when any reasonable creature would have given up. Tonight they were learning this lesson. The docking bay was larger than expected. It stretched out beneath massive windows that looked out into the blackness of space. Stars glittered in the void like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there, hidden by distance and darkness, Earth was waiting. 3 ships sat on the landing platforms. 2 were small fighters, built for speed and combat. The third was a transport vessel, big enough to hold all 12 humans with room to spare. But between the humans and the ship stood Commander. He was not alone. 20 guards flanked him in a wide semicircle, their weapons raised and ready. Stood slightly behind the commander, his compound eyes wide with something that might have been fear or disbelief or both. The humans stopped at the edge of the bay. They were tired. They were wounded. Some of them could barely stand. Had a gash on his forehead from a guard's weapon, was limping from a fall on the stairs. The 2 teenagers were holding each other up, shaking with exhaustion. Stepped forward. Her hands were wrapped in blood-soaked cloth. Her suit was torn and stained, but she stood straight and her eyes were clear. Made a sound like grinding stones. The translator turned it into words. "You think you can escape? Look at yourselves. Wounded, weak, surrounded. This rebellion is over." "We just walked through your entire facility," said. Her voice was calm and steady. "We took down 40 of your soldiers with maintenance tools. Does that seem weak to you?" Pushed forward, his mandibles clicking with agitation. "This is impossible. You have no natural weapons, no claws, no armor. Our analysis was thorough. We tested everything." Looked at the scientist. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she began to speak. "You studied our bodies," she said. "You never studied our history." She took another step forward. The guards shifted nervously. 60,000 years ago, my ancestors walked out of Africa with nothing but stone tools. They crossed deserts that would kill your soldiers in hours. They survived ice ages that froze entire continents. They hunted mammoths with sharpened sticks. Another step, his hand tightened on his weapon. 5,000 years ago, we built pyramids that still stand today. We created writing and mathematics and medicine. We looked at the stars and said, we will go there someday. His mandibles had stopped moving. He was frozen, listening. 500 years ago, we crossed oceans in wooden boats. We mapped the entire world. We discovered forces your species probably never imagined. Gravity, magnetism, the structure of atoms. His voice grew stronger with every word. 80 years ago, we split the atom. We released the fire of the sun itself. We could burn cities to ash with a single weapon, and we chose not to use it, because we knew that power required wisdom. She stood now just a few meters from, close enough to see the reflection of her own face in his dark eyes. 50 years ago, we walked on our moon. We left footprints in the dust and planted a flag. We looked back at our planet and saw how small it was, how precious, how alone in the darkness. The guards were lowering their weapons slightly, not because they had been ordered to, because they were listening. We are the species that runs into burning buildings to save strangers. We are the species that dives into frozen water to rescue drowning children. We are the species that carries wounded friends for miles through enemy fire because we refuse to leave anyone behind. Raised her bloody hands. The torn cloth fell away, revealing the raw wounds beneath. You see these? I tore your strongest metal with nothing but flesh and bone. Not because I am special, because I am human. Because when we have no other choice, we find strength that your machines cannot measure. She locked eyes with. We are not prey. We are not weak. We are the monsters that other monsters told stories about. We are the apex predators of a death world. And you made a very, very serious mistake when you put us in cages. Silence filled the docking bay. Even the hum of the station's machinery seemed to fade. Then's voice cut through the tension. Now. She had slipped away during speech. She had found the environmental control panel near the main airlock. Her fingers flew across the buttons. The blast doors slammed shut behind the guards, cutting them off from reinforcements. Emergency lights flashed. Alarms screamed. The guards spun in confusion, unsure where to aim their weapons. The humans attacked. Hit before he could raise his weapon. Her fist caught him in the soft tissue where his mandibles connected to his face. The commander staggered back with a howl of pain. His weapon clattered to the floor. Around her, the other humans fought with the fury of cornered animals, tackled a guard twice his size, using momentum to drive the alien into a bulkhead. The two teenagers worked together, one distracting while the other struck, grabbed a fallen weapon and used it like a club, smashing it against armored shells. It was chaos. It was beautiful. It was 12 humans against 20 soldiers, and they were losing. Kicked weapon away and looked down at him. The commander was on his back, one arm raised to protect his face. His compound eyes reflected her image in fragments. Mercy, he clicked. The translator gave the word a pleading tone. I surrender. Stared at him for a long moment. Then she stepped back. We're not like you, she said. We don't kill prisoners. She left him on the floor and ran to the transport ship. Was already at the ramp, helping wounded humans inside. Climbed into the cockpit and began working the alien controls. This interface is strange, she muttered, but I can figure it out. Give me 30 seconds. Counted the humans as they boarded. 10, 11, 12. Everyone was alive, injured, exhausted, but alive. The engines hummed to life. The ship shuddered as it lifted from the platform. Through the cockpit window, could see standing at the observation deck. The scientist had not fought. He had only watched. Now he stared at the escaping ship with those strange compound eyes, his mandibles slack with disbelief. The transport shot through the opening bay doors and into the void of space. Stars wheeled around them as oriented the ship toward a safe jump point. Collapsed into a seat. For the first time in a week, she allowed herself to feel the pain. Her hands were destroyed. Her body was broken. She had pushed herself far beyond any limit she had known. But they were free. Sat down beside her. He took her ruined hands gently in his own and began cleaning the wounds with supplies from the ship's medical kit. That speech, he said quietly, where did that come from? Smiled. It was not a cold smile this time. It was tired and warm and real. From Earth, she said. From everyone who ever survived when they should have died. From everyone who ever kept fighting when there was no hope left. Called back from the cockpit. Jump drive is charging. Where are we going? Looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere in that vast darkness her home world waited. Her family, her friends, everyone who had thought she was dead. Home, she said. We go home first. She paused, then added with a grim smile. And then we come back, with friends, with ships, with weapons. Looked at her with raised eyebrows. Revenge. Shook her head. Justice, to have other prisoners, other humans, other species they think are weak. We're going to find them all, we're going to free them all. The jump drive activated. The stars stretched into long lines of light. The ship hurled itself across the galaxy toward home. Behind them, on the station, returned to his laboratory. His hands trembled as he activated his recording device. Addendum to Species 7742H analysis, he said. His voice was unsteady. Previous conclusions regarding threat level must be revised, completely revised. He paused, struggling to find the right words. Humans are not prey, he finally said. They are apex predators who have learned to hide their claws. Their weapons are not physical. Their weapons are will, determination, the absolute refusal to accept defeat. He looked at his notes, all those careful measurements and observations, and pushed them aside. Recommend immediate reclassification of species 7742H from minimal threat to extreme danger. Recommend no further capture attempts. Recommend no further contact. He ended the recording and sat in silence for a long time. In the darkness of space, a small transport ship carried 12 humans toward home, and in the front seat, a woman with torn hands and tired eyes was already planning her return. They had learned their lesson. Now it was time for the rest of the galaxy to learn as well. Tomorrow, they would never forget it. That was about to change. Sat down in the center of her cell, crossed her legs, and began to plan.